All right, so picking up where we left off, we've got the period was 4 here, so we did complete our cycle within 4 units, but then we are still graphing it. And so if I were to continue this graph to 2 pi, it would go a little bit past 6. And notice I don't actually end up finishing the cycle, but that's okay. I'm more worried about graphing on that scale of 0 to 2 pi. Let's do one more. Sketch the graph of this, y equals sine 1/3 of theta. And so we're going to have amplitude is equal to the absolute value of the number in front of sine, which in this case is just 1. So that would just be 1. I'm actually going to go ahead and count by a half just to give myself a little bit more space. But if you want to put the 1 here, that's fine too. For the period, we're going to have 2 pi over 1/3. This would give us 6 pi. If you need to see that worked out, we're just doing 2 pi divided by 1/3. That's the same as doing 2 pi times 3. That's how I got 6 pi. All right, so if I'm graphing from 0 to 2 pi, I'm going to do this in 2 ways. I'm going to show the 1 cycle, and I'm also going to show 0 to 2 pi. Let's start with the 1 cycle. I know that I would start at 0, but I would end at 6 pi this time. All right, so I've got 0 to 6 pi. Halfway between that would be 3 pi. Then halfway between that again would be 3 over 2. I'm just taking 3 divided by 2. Halfway between these two would be 5 pi over 2, excuse me. And so what I would end up doing is graphing my maximum here, minimum here, and there's my midpoint, so I'm going to graph this line. And that's what that would look like. But what if I was asked to sketch it on a scale of 0 to 2 pi? What this would end up looking like is, get my 1 back on there, -1. This means that there would be 1/3 of a cycle. 1/3 of a cycle between 0 and 2 pi. So not even half of a cycle, less than that. So if I put 2 pi over here and 0, we saw in the last one that we actually had to go to 3 pi to get the minimum. And so what's actually going to happen is that if I have pi here and 3 pi over 2, what we saw was that our maximum was at 3 pi over 2. So our graph, if we just look at the 0 to 2 pi snapshot, is going to look like this. It's not even going to get past the theta axis. It's not going to cross down below into the negative values, and that's okay. So just look carefully. Some problems I might ask you to only sketch 1 cycle, in which case it would look how I did this problem to begin with, 0 to 6 pi. But a lot of them I'll ask you to graph 0 to 2 pi. And in that case, it would look like this. All right, so, oh, I do have one more, sorry. Y equals -2 sine of 1/2 theta. My amplitude, it looks like it's negative, but really I'm taking the absolute value, and that would give me a +2. So I'm going to count by 1s. And then my period would be 2 pi over b. And this is going to give me 4 pi. So in this case, let's go ahead and follow these directions and say, just sketch the 1 cycle. So if we're doing that, then that means that 1 cycle is from 0 to 4 pi. So from 0 to 4 pi. And if I want to go halfway between those, half of 4 pi would be 2 pi. Halfway between those to find my maximum would be pi, and halfway between these two would be 3 pi. And I actually kind of like this one because it's pretty easy. I don't have any fractions to deal with. Now, notice that we have this negative sign, and that negative sign means that instead of starting with it going up and then coming down, we're going to go the opposite way. We're going to start with it going down and then come back up. So instead of making this one be the maximum like we normally would, bringing it up here, it's actually going to be the minimum. And we're just going to flip this graph over the theta axis. And so it's going to look, oh man, I was doing so well till the end there. There we go. It's a little bit better. And that's what it would look like. So this one, I did sketch one cycle. If I were to graph only 0 to 2 pi though, then notice that my graph would only be this much. And so it would have a different look. It would look like I've only graphed half of this half of the cycle, but you just have to read the directions carefully and see what are we asking for. All right. So check Google Classroom, and as always, let me know if you have any questions.